All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Got about 12 people in attendance so far. Hopefully a few more will join us as we go. Just a few things I want to make everybody aware of before we start our program. First and foremost, for those that have not been aware yet, we are a recipient of a Pinnacle Award, and this is a really big deal for our chapter. This is something that 77 other state and local chapters submitted applications for, and we were one of 12 across the country that were chosen to be recipients of the Pinnacle Award for our program, our SHRM Essentials program that we did back in the spring of 2019. And it's been a while since then, but we've been recognized for that program, and that goes to the work ethic and efforts of that board that was there for that period of time. We had a great turnout during that program, and it resulted in some new members, and that's what helped lead us to be recipients of that award. So I appreciate everybody's efforts in that. And they're supposed to send out a press release that we can use. So as soon as that gets delivered to us, we'll certainly be promoting that even more on our social media and our website, newsletters. They are sending me a trophy in the mail. So as soon as we get that, I definitely want to make sure we get an opportunity to do something with it. Obviously during COVID, it's not normal times, but I would like to have some sort of photo opportunity or be able to pass that thing around to everybody and let everybody take a picture with it, just to recognize the hard work and effort that everybody put into achieving that recognition. So definitely just want to continue to remind people about that. Another thing I want to point out is you may have noticed a couple emails that you've received here lately that we're trying to give thanks for being a member of SHRM. And this is just an effort to try to help our members join SHRM National as well. I mean, we have a lot of, tri-state SHRM members, about 78, but not all of those members are members of the national organization. And there's a lot of benefits that go along with being members of the national organization. We have tried to steal some of those ideas, like message boards and videos and things like that, but there's just so much access and so much resources and materials that you have available to you by being a member of SHRM National, by going onto their website. They have templates for job descriptions, policies, procedures, things that you can steal a lot of information from without having to start from scratch. So if you're a small organization, that's really helpful. And even as a medium-sized organization like the city, I found it very beneficial. So if you join or renew your membership to SHRM National during the month of November, you're going to be eligible to receive a $50 prepaid gift card, and 4 winners will be chosen. To be eligible to win, you must join or renew your membership during the month of November and provide proof of payment that occurred between November 1st and November 30th. And you will submit that receipt to myself. And my email is james.bramlett@txkusa.org. All of that's in the emails that you're receiving. And proof of payment needs to be received by December 1st, 2020, so we can try to announce the winners on December 4th. So definitely check that out. Chance to alleviate some of the burden of the cost of joining if you could win a $50 gift card. All right. Next thing is just recognizing our board members for 2021, just kind of making you aware. We had our election recently. Board members, I appreciate everybody's participation in that. Just to kind of give you a brief rundown, I will be remaining as president for 2021. Michelle Marbut is still our immediate past president. It's kind of a newer face, so to speak, coming back, as Latanya McElroy will be our president-elect. So she should be your president for 2022. And then Tara Zwerman is VP of membership. That's somebody that's been in that position for a little while. Juliana Gonzalez is still our secretary. Jennifer Studdard is still our treasurer. Lane Christensen Kelton is one of the at-large members. Her term is going to expire at the end of December. So and that's December 31st, 2021. So for those interested in getting more involved, keep that in mind. That's going to be a position that will be opening up at the beginning of 2022. So if you're interested in getting involved, consider trying to apply for that at-large position. Felicia Drake is another at-large position. Her term expires at the end of 2022. And then Melinda Womack, who's on with us today, she'll be joining our board as the third at-large member, and she'll be serving a 3-year term until the end of 2023. Brittany Yeldale is our program chair, Steve Collier, our certification chair, Leslie McBride, our hospitality chair. A new face to the board is Taylor Daniel. She'll be VP of Marketing. She works over at the Texarkana Regional Arts and Humanities Council. Lindsay Price will remain with us as a workforce readiness chair. Louise Tausch is our director of legal affairs, and that rounds out our board. So we will plan on having some type of induction ceremony in January, whether that be virtual or in person. So for those folks that are going to be on the board, I will be in contact with you between now and then to try to set that up. However we're going to do that, still trying to see what the best way is to handle it. A couple more reminders, and then I'm going to finish up because I promised Kathleen I was only going to take 5 minutes, and I've already gone over that. But we are still planning on having a SHRM Essentials course in the spring. If you're interested, please reach out to me. Let me know that you're interested in that. That's, again, the course that led to us winning the Pinnacle Award. The information on that SHRM Essentials course can be found on our website on the homepage at tristateshrm.org. Steve Collier leads our SHRM certification prep course. Currently, we have one person in the fall course, and I think we can do better. Okay, I think we can do better. We need to do better. I know everybody in our chapter is not certified as a SHRM CP or SCP. So if you're not, please consider going through that course. And correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but Steve will be planning on having a spring course as well. And so if you're interested in that, reach out to Steve Collier. Is that correct,
That's
Steve?
right. Yes, correct. Thank you.
So take the time to consider that. You've got a little ways before you have to make any decisions if you want to do it in the spring, but it's a great course. It'll help you advance your career, I believe, and make you more marketable to other organizations, because we all know the job market is volatile, especially during these times, and you never know when those credentials may help you down the road. And then last but not least, December 8th, we are going to have a regular meeting on December 8th. Angela Gray is going to be presenting. She's vocational rehab counselor with the Arkansas Division of Workforce Services. So we appreciate Angela doing that. We look forward to her presentation on December 8th. We decided to do this just to give you an opportunity to receive some more certification credits towards your certification. So we've all missed out on a lot of training this year. And because of that, instead of having a social event, which not real smart right now anyways due to COVID, we thought, why not provide you with another opportunity to get another hour of recertification credits towards your SHRM certification or your HRCI certification. All right. So with that being said, one last thing. Laney Basham was unable to attend today, but they got a lot of events going on with track in November and December. So if you're looking for an event to possibly promote to your employees for some employee engagement, then please reach out to Laney Basham at track, and she'll be glad to help you set that up. All right. So without further ado, I will now cut my time off and go to our speaker, Kathleen. Let me pull up her bio here. So Kathleen McComber is the president of the Heart Group. The Heart Group is a human resource consulting firm, and their focus is to work with small to mid-sized business owners and executives to develop human resources practices that are best aligned with their business objectives and strategic plans. So please consider her if that's something that you feel like could benefit your organization. And I'm going to let her take it from here to talk about violence in the workplace. Kathleen, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm hoping I'm sharing the screen with you now.
I do not see it currently, Kathleen. Now it's popping up. Now it's popping up.
Okay. I think there's a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
And let's see if it's going to go from the beginning. There. Is that working for everyone?
Yes, you're good, Kathleen.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here and I appreciate it. I think when originally contacted by your chapter, I was going to speak in May, and obviously things changed. And therefore, we are doing it now in November and doing it by Zoom. I will tell you, I've not spoken a lot this way, so we'll see how it goes for everyone. This is a topic that I have been speaking on about 15 years, and it started a long time ago because of a personal experience. And the personal experience was when I was a vice president of human resources for an organization. And unfortunately, we had an event happen and at our workplace. And through that experience, I learned a lot about something that I knew nothing about, and felt that human resource professionals could really benefit by my lessons learned. And originally, when I started, you really didn't hear about this a lot. Unfortunately, it has become a subject that is often heard on the news more than we ever want to hear it. And I'm sure none of those people who had that experience expected it to happen. So the way I've divided this presentation is the first half is just telling my story. And then the second half is really giving you tools. I feel when I speak, it's important that you have a takeaway, that there are things that you can resource and learn about through the presentation. So that's what I'm going to go over the next 45 minutes or so that we have. So I'll start with the personal experience. And this gentleman was one of my employees. I was at Staffmark, which is a temporary staffing company, and we own staffing companies, both IT and commercial and industrial. And he worked in a company we owned in Boston. Now, what I want everyone listening today as an HR person, I want you to, I call it jump in my shoes. And as I talk through this experience, I want you to think about, are you prepared as an organization? What would you do? What happened? And if it happened to me as the head of HR, how would I take care of things? So it started out on a day after Christmas in 2000. I was working for Staffmark, also known as Edgewater Technology at the time. And I was moving back and had actually just moved back from Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I lived, to North Little Rock, Arkansas. And as you guys know, we don't do very well when we have inclement weather. And so Christmas Day in 2000, we had an ice storm. And I was actually in my home, and it was my last week to work for Edgewater Technology. January 1, I was taking a new job. And I get a call from my father, and he's watching CNN. So his favorite things to do at that time were watching the news and the weather. So he was tied to the TV, and he calls me and he says, Kathleen, I'm seeing something on the news and I think they're talking about your company. Turn it on. So I did. And there staring me on the TV was our entrance in Boston, Massachusetts, or a suburb of our Edgewater Technology there. And they're saying that there had been a workplace shooting. So if you had a work site and you got that message and they're away from you physically, what do you do? So the first thing I did sitting at my dining room table was to call our CEO, who was in Fayetteville. I got his wife on the phone and I said, Tammy, I just heard about the situation at Edgewater and I need to see if Cleet needs to talk to me. And she said, oh, he's on the phone with Shirley, who is the president, the company we bought about a year before, but he wants to talk to you. And so he'll call you right back. So not 5 minutes, Cleet calls me and he said, I need you to get to the airport and fly to Boston right now. And I said, well, Cleet, our airport's closed because of the weather. And he said, well, go rent a plane and fly up there. And I said, well, the same airstrip that we use for rentals is also our commercial, and I can't get out of town. I said, but I'll tell you what, I had a director of human resources there, Cheryl, and Cheryl was on site. So I said, I will call Cheryl and I will talk to her and I'll walk her through what I think we ought to do. Now, we had no violence in the workplace policy. We had never even talked about if there was a shooting at the facility, what would happen. We'd not educated employees. We had not educated managers on warning signs. Nothing had ever been done. This was 2000. It just wasn't as frequent as it is today. And as I said that I would call Cheryl, Cleet pauses and he says, are you sitting down? I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, I think you need to sit down. I've got some news for you. And he proceeded to tell me that Cheryl was the first one shot and killed, along with 7 other employees that day, December 26th. And this gentleman, Michael McDermott, was a software engineer for us. And he had shot and killed everyone that he aimed and targeted. So I had 7 employees dead. So if you don't think that makes you stop, pause, and decide what's next. So what I said was, Clete, I've got to digest this. I said, let me think about it and I'll call you back. So I picked up the phone and I immediately called SHRM because, as you know, they have an information center. And I got a recording. It said, because this was the 26th, Christmas was on a Monday and Christmas Eve was a Sunday, and they were closed observing Christmas Eve. So that is what I thought, then no resource. Well, I was the chair, the top volunteer leader of SHRM. I was the chair of the board of SHRM in 1998 and had become very close to now the CEO who's been gone a long time, that's retired, Mike Losey. And I had his direct number. And I just happened to pick up the phone, call his direct number, and he answered the phone. And I said, I don't know if you've been watching TV, but I've had a shooting at my workplace. I need some resources. He said, well, I'm the only one here today. He said, I'm in my office cleaning it out, because he was retiring December 31st. But he said, you know what? I'll go down to the information center and I will see if I can find you some help. So an hour later, he calls me. And he gave me 3 key things that helped me through this ordeal. One, he gave me the Employee Assistance Association. So like SHRM, for EAPs, there's an association. And he gave me the phone number. And thankfully, they were working that day. Secondly, he gave me a resource to deal with the public. We were a public company, stock traded on NASDAQ. And I felt that the media was going to be all over this, and we needed some experts to talk with the media for our CEO to bounce things off of, and press releases and information. And third, he gave me legal counsel in the state of Massachusetts. I did not know the state laws, workers' comp or otherwise, and I needed to understand our exposure and what was going to happen. So I immediately called our CEO back and gave him that information, and we interviewed the different ones. The gentleman who was our media expert actually was a former press secretary for Dan Quayle. He had helped with, some of you are too young to remember this, but there was a thing called the Tylenol deaths, and he had helped with that particular event. And so then that night at my dining room table, I was on a conference call with the experts that we had interviewed and hired, with all of our senior executives, and with the woman who was the president of this organization, Shirley. And we heard firsthand what had happened that morning at Edgewater Technology. Michael McDermott had come to work, as well as 50 other people. At that location, employees had to swipe a card and get in, so we kept people out. We had 150 that normally worked that day, and only 50 had come in because of the holiday. He came in, went to his cubicle, started doing his work. Everybody else did too. And about 9 o'clock, there were a group of women who were at the reception area. The director of human resources, Cheryl, the CEO's executive assistant, Peggy, and the receptionist, Janet, who was filling in for her sister who was off. And as they were standing there talking, Michael comes down. It was a rectangle shaped building, and he was coming down in the middle where they were talking. And Cheryl turned to him and said, "Michael, how are you today?" And he's carrying a duffel bag, and he sets it down and he unzips it, and he said, "I'm here to take care of human resources and accounting." He pulled out an AK-47 and he shot Cheryl and Janet and killed both of them. Peggy had started walking as he came up toward her desk at a cubicle, and he did not shoot her. And she went and hid under her desk. He proceeds to walk down to where human resources and accounting had their offices together. On the way, a man, Lou, jumped out and tried to stop him. He shoots Lou and kills him. Sorry, sometimes this still gets me emotional. He then goes down another hallway, and Jennifer, 26 years old, first day back from FMLA with a 10-week-old baby at home, is at a makeshift desk for her returning to work, and she's sitting there and he shoots her. So now we have 4. He then goes to the mezzanine where HR and accounting are, and they had heard the shooting and they had locked the door. He blows the door down with the gun and he goes in, and there are 4 people in that room. 1 for human resources and 3 for accounting. 3 of them, Rose, Paul, and Craig, all hid under their desk, and 1 went to the back of the room and put coats on top of her, Linda. And as the 3, Rose, Craig, and Paul, are begging for their life, "Don't shoot me, please don't shoot me," he shoots all 3 of them and kills them. Linda, he did not know was back there, who heard everything. And he leaves her because he doesn't recognize that she's hiding. He retraces his steps, comes to the front of the building. There are people hiding under their cubicles where he had walked, where his office was. Those people escaped when he started shooting. There was a door they could get out. The others were trapped. So as he comes back, he sits at the front at the reception area, and the people that had gotten out immediately had called 911, and the SWAT team from the small town there were on the scene within minutes. And as I was talking to the sergeant after the shooting, he said, "My partner and I came up to the center and we could see Cheryl laying on the floor. And we had just gotten back from training, and part of that training was to avoid a situation like Columbine, which had just happened, where they let the students and teachers stay in the building way too long, and some bled out or would have lived if they had gotten in. So they break down the door and rush in, and they go to Cheryl and they see she's dead. And out of the corner of the sergeant's eye, he sees a movement, and he turns around, and there's Michael with the AK-47 across his body, the duffel bag down at his feet, sitting in a chair. And they rush over to him and get him on the ground. And they put their foot in the center of his back as they're handcuffing him. And Michael said to them, "I can't breathe. You're pushing too hard. Please release." They did. And as they're pulling him up, he says, "I don't speak German." And that's all he said the whole time. He had 2 handguns. He had rounds of ammunition. He had another rifle, all in this bag. And we found out by the security that he had actually come in Christmas Day and taken this bag and put it in the top of his cubicle. So he had planned this prior to the shooting. It wasn't a spur of the moment that morning. So we heard all of this from Shirley, our president. He had also targeted them, the CEO and the CFO and the chief information officer. He went through their offices, but all of them were gone that morning. So as we're hearing this, what obviously is the question is, why? Well, 2 weeks before, Cheryl had called Michael into her office, my director of human resources. And I think how many times HR people do this. he had gotten a garnishment for his wages for back taxes with the IRS. And she told him that she was going to have to take money out of his paycheck to pay these back taxes. And he reacted violently. He started using profanity. Why is this following me? I'm so sick of it, and making comments. And Cheryl, being the good HR person that she was, said, Michael, we'll wait until after Christmas. I'll even call him and see if we can reduce the amount. We will work on this together. The next day, he approached accounting, who did payroll. And he asked them, and they said, well, we're under order. We can't not do this. And we have to take out the money. Now, what I think about now, knowing what I know in my research and just learning more about this, that should have been a warning sign to Cheryl. But she wasn't educated. And so she didn't do anything else. And so what he did on December 26th, when he opened fire and taking care of human resources and accounting, was he actually targeted the messenger, who had nothing to do with what was supposed to transpire. They had no control over this tax and this garnishment. It was all his own doing. But it caused him to lose sight of mentally his situation. So as I worked on this, several things came out. One, they did a white paper at the University of Virginia and on Edgewater Technology and the shooting. And so I got a copy of this because they talked about crisis management and how it was handled. And so while I'm not named, I'm certainly referred to. Are you watching CNN? The caller frantically screamed into the phone at Larry Smith, president of Institute for Crisis Management. Well, I'm the one screaming into the phone. He's talking about me. Smith quickly turned on his television and switched the channel to CNN. He saw images of men in black SWAT team-like apparel with automatic weapons and riot gear surrounding a brick building. I said, that's us. This was shortly after lunch on December 26th. The voice on the other end of the telephone was the vice president of human resources from headquarters, calling about their business division in Wakefield, Massachusetts. She said she was calling on behalf of the corporate CEO in Arkansas. So we talked, and that's who we hired. And that was worth it because my CEO would read things in the paper all week, such as this I'm showing you on my screen. He would want to contradict the paper, and our expert says, we don't want to do that. We want to do press releases. We want to tell them what we're doing. So he would be upset, and I understand that. But our helper, Larry Smith, said, no, we want to tell our own story. And we did that. We actually held a news conference. This happened on Tuesday. I was there all week. We had employee meetings. We asked them what they wanted to do. We did whatever they wanted. As far as we brought in counselors through the EAP Association. We had counselors that had been involved and worked other shootings at work sites, which was a requirement of mine. I wanted someone who knew what these employees were going through. So we had meetings and had them talk this through. We brought in the attorneys and dealt with any issues. We offered financial support to the families, and we had one person talk to them. Jennifer, the 26-year-old, was the main breadwinner. She had no immediate family. All of hers were in Florida. We flew them all up to Boston immediately. And the next week, I spent the week going to funerals. And we did our own memorial service for everyone and had their pictures because our counselors told us that they felt it was a good idea to have the employees get to express their love for these employees. And we allowed one media person and one camera in that particular memorial. So that was going to be my last week. I stayed on another week, went back the week of New Year's, helped them find an HR person and brought him in. He had just retired and he was just what they needed to get them through. And Michael went to trial They don't have the death penalty in Massachusetts. So there was an article in the paper here in Arkansas about him because of the connection of Arkansas company owning them at the time. And it said Michael McDermott, who has pleaded insanity in the trial and the slaying of 7 co-workers at Edgewater Technology in Wakefield, Massachusetts, told jurors that 12 days before the shooting, that's when Cheryl talked to him. The archangel, Saint Michael, appeared and told him how to earn a ticket to heaven, and that during the shooting, he was transported in time to 1940 and Hitler's bunker, where he killed who he thought was Hitler and 6 of Hitler's henchmen to save the world from the Holocaust. Now, if you remember what I told you a few minutes ago, that as the police officer was pulling him up, he said, "I don't speak German." So he was actually right there setting up, which is what he did, his insanity defense, by saying he didn't speak German and then telling the story that he thought he killed Hitler and Hitler's comrades. The jury didn't believe it, didn't fall for it, and he was convicted in April of 2002. So it took 2 years to bring him to justice, almost a year and a half, and he's serving life. Now, one of the things when you think back about good employees, because I went through and kind of debriefed in my mind, Michael was referred by another employee. He was a graduate of MIT. He served in the Navy on a nuclear submarine and had gone through all these psychological testings to be able to be on the submarine. His customers loved him. They thought he was great. So if you think about your model up until the shooting, you never know what is behind the scenes, such as when they went to his apartment. And by the way, he was being evicted for non-payment. At the same time, we were garnishing his wages. So all of these things culminated in his losing control and what he thought was taking care of people who were causing just all kinds of turmoil in his life. And so you don't know these things. If Cheryl had, we didn't have an EAP. If we maybe had an EAP, or she had thought this was his acting strange when he had lost control, she could have possibly referred him and moved his retribution or his feelings toward her to someone else, or a counselor who would be trained to deal with his personal situation. As I said, I walked away and I often wondered how Edgewater did. And one of my friends who served on the SHRM board with me was, he's a faculty member at Boston University. And in 2004, there was an article in the paper about Edgewater, and it was called Triumph Over Tragedy. And it said that Edgewater was on a roll and they'd sold the firm to Arkansas-based Staffmark, and then disaster struck on December 2000. Software tester Michael McDermott, 42, walked into the brick building and gunned down 7 co-workers. I had a bullet hole through the door, recalls Singleton, now president and chief executive. It was ugly. There was no rush to get back there, so we went to Peabody, another location they had just rented. We had daily meetings. We did a lot of crying. We did a lot of talking. It took 3 months to get workers back into the building. And we had counselors there the first day we went back to the other location, and some wanted to go back into the building because they thought if they didn't, after the police released it to us, that it meant he won, and they did not want that. And so it also went on to say Edgewater has bounced back. They maintain that the firm's resilience stems in part from the actions it took to mitigate the impact of workplace violence on its employees. This is a success story. Paul Smith, senior consultant at RHR International, a management psychological firm in New York. They did all the right things, and now they're reaping the benefits. Edgewater's decision to focus on employees and the shooting victims' families paid off. And that was one of the things that I felt was very important, was that we needed to listen to our employees, and what they said they needed, that's what we would do. And so that whole 2 weeks that I was there and helped them, I felt like I did all I could do, but I always felt like I wasn't educated enough, and I wanted other people to not I mean, to know more than I did at the time. So that's what brought me to this presentation and the second half and sharing information for you and resources. And so many of you probably have things in place. So what you might do is test yourself against some of the things I'm suggesting and see if you already have them in place, they're on your checklist, and you would be ready for an event, even though I don't think anyone's ready, but an event such as this tragedy. So the first thing I want to share is I have all these people who walked in their office, like all of our employees did the day after Christmas, after a wonderful celebration, and their lives changed overnight. And they never thought anything about what could be facing them. So what I want to look at is really the definition of workplace violence, because it's not just shootings like what I was involved in, but it's many other things. It can be even domestic, it could be suicide. I retired from UAMS after 16 years, and we had a patient who had just gotten bad news come in for his follow-up after being hospitalized in our outpatient clinic. We took him back to a room. The nurse was still in the room with him. He pulls out a gun and he commits suicide. And what trauma that nurse went through, and everyone associated, and even thinking sometimes he could have killed me too, and didn't. So you've got to see about what really is a physical assault, a threatening behavior, verbal abuse in the workplace. Now, the top picture in the slide is actually Michael being led in for his first hearing in court. And if you don't recognize the bottom one, it's the one who did this shooting that sent something at, he was at Virginia Tech, but this was his picture he sent to NBC News after he had been to Virginia Tech and committed all of those killings. So there's some statistics. It's the leading cause of death for women in the workplace, and it's the second overall cause for American workers to die at the workplace. And it's increased significantly from 1992 to 2006. There have been 11,613 homicides. Over 2 million workers are victims of violent crime while on duty at work. It's increased 41% over the last 10 years. It costs a lot, even though that is not something we worried about. And what I'm proud of is not one family brought legal action against us, saying there was any neglect on our part about the killings. And except for rape and sexual assault, males experience workplace violence at a higher rate than females. So there are 4 types. There's obviously robbery, shoplifting. If you're in retail, you think of that, or in banking. There's the customers, which goes along with that. Also patients. When I was at UAMS, we really, in our psychiatric institute, spent a lot of time with our nurses and administrators there, preparing them should a patient get violent with them. There's worker on worker, or former worker, and then there is domestic. So the cost in the workplace is, of course, the lost productivity, which we didn't even count that, but there was a lot of lost days. It didn't matter. There could be legal expense, property damage. Learned a lot. There's a company who will come in. It's called Aftermath. We hired, and they came into our workplace over the weekend and removed all evidence of all the gunshots and broken glass and damage to the workplace. We closed off the mezzanine. It's never been used again. We took away Michael's cubicle, and they will do all of that for you. We were concerned about our public image, which is why we did a lot of the media press releases and a news conference. And we had guards there. We hired off-duty police officers, at least until our employees were comfortable about being safe at work. Here are some of the jobs that, of course, you would predict are the highest risk: taxi cab, police, private guards, and then food and lodging establishments. Now, this is where you need to take this slide and think about who you work for. And of these top 10, can you check that you are involved, or your employees are involved with contact with people, delivery, or whatever, to see where you might be at risk, because you might have 5 of these top 10. because this is where you are open to some type of violent act at your place of employment. Now, there are some legal situations to think about. Right now, there are no specific laws about violence in the workplace other than under OSHA and the statutes about death at the workplace. And all it says at this point is that an employer has a duty to protect against recognized hazards. And that's all. It's very broad and very vague. So OSHA they could issue a citation. They did not issue a citation to us. They did not feel like we were neglectful at all in this particular action. And then you have the obligation, if you're investigating some type of violence, such as I got a call on a weekend and a supervisor overheard another employee that they were upset. They'd gotten a written warning and they were going to come in Monday morning and they were going to take care of their supervisor. And so for us, we kind of ranked at UAMS the possibility of something happening based on what you hear and based on how we rank it on a 1 to 5 scale. Then the protocol would be different. Well, this we considered a 5, and with a 5, police were notified. We saw where he parked. We watched him come into work. We let him go to his place at work, and then we took him out and terminated him. But you do need to consider due process, and you need to investigate thoroughly before you take action, because you need to make sure the stories are truthful, if it even means having the time to interview employees who may report it or overheard something. If you have nothing in place, here's a kind of a checklist of what needs to happen. It's a multidisciplinary approach, and you involve lots of different individuals in your organization. And this is just a possible list of who could be on that committee and who you need to involve in writing policies or walking through what ifs, or just who to call if there's an investigation. And then you need to start at the top, and management needs to be committed to developing a policy and a program. And one of the keys, and I'm going to talk about in a minute, are these last 2 bullets: a work site analysis and hazard prevention. So anything you can do ahead of time to prevent it, that's what you want to do. And there are some great tools to just check your workplace and see how ready you would be to either prevent it or have it under control. And then you need to do education on your policy. And we used to do once a year a training on violence in the workplace. They would have to go through a PowerPoint, sign off on it that they saw it, and it was a requirement at our organization. But it was online. They didn't have to go to a class, but it was a requirement and a condition of employment. We also kept records of every situation and what we did about those situations and what action we took to make sure we were consistent with different ones. This is just a quote. HR Magazine actually did an article about our organization, and he just said, the lightning rod for workplace violence, other than you're hired, what good news does HR deliver? I think about that a lot. You know, we deal with terminations, disciplinary actions, all of those things that we sit in on and help counsel our managers. So a lot of times we deal with more negative than we do positive, which is unfortunate. So here are keys. Here's your step-by-step process to develop a plan. Get your group, design the program, establish the threat management team. We had one at UAMS that was our legal counsel, me, we had our employee relations person, and we had a manager. And anytime we got called, then that group looked at all the details and made a decision of how to move forward. So we were involved in that information and decision making. And so this is your checklist of really what to do. Now, threat assessment. That is just deciding when something comes to a central location and is reported, how you handle those things in your protocol. We had a form we filled out. We went and talked with witnesses and we wrote up all the accounts. And then from that, like I mentioned about the employee who was threatening, we scored them. And then we had a protocol. If it's a 3, this is what we did, so that we were consistent in the deciding factor of how we handled those. So that's how we took care of everything. We might get it, a supervisor might get an email from an employee unhappy and threatening. And so we would read that and make decisions, whatever it might be. Here are 4 areas of great resources for you. Every time there's an incident, there is a form. OSHA has one, and it's a really good one. An investigation form. The FBI has a whole manual on workplace violence, and you can plagiarize it. It has all the forms that you might need. And also there's a threat assessment report on the OSHA.gov website if you just put in the search violence in the workplace. And so those are all things that you could resource about the threat assessment team, about how to handle the report of an incident. And they're free. I always love free and great resources for you related to those things. The risk assessment survey is actually looking at your physical location and how secure it is. Now, I used to teach a graduate class on violence in the workplace, and I would have police officers, I would have security people at colleges, I would have those who worked for making calls on for social work. And so what you need to come up with is a survey about your internal location and how safe it is, and the exterior of your particular workplace. And, let me give you an example. At UAMS, we had 453 exit doors. And we had 11,000 employees. It was a huge campus. They were only supposed to be exit doors, but people would prop them open with a rock or a brick because that exit door was a quicker way to get to the cafeteria. And then they'd come back and they'd knock the brick out and close their door. We got very concerned about this being entrance doors for people we did not want on campus. And so when we did one of our risk assessments, this particular issue came up. And so we ended up putting alarms on the exit doors. And so if they were open more than a minute, they would go off, and someone in security would go check on that door, and they would close it, because we did not want people being able to come in, since we wanted to monitor the entrances to our facility. So these are 4 excellent reports or checklists that you could use to actually assess the safety of your workplace. They have questions, and they cover internal, external, all kinds of things about even your employees and what you're telling them. I like the 3rd one down, the self-inspection, and I like the FBI, but all of them are good. And so if you went again to FBI or OSHA, you would find these resources, and it would be interesting. I know I had one come back to me and said, I don't think I want to work at this employer anymore. They don't keep us safe at all, because I had my students take these forms and go back and check their work site. And they were amazed at how many openings or what they saw as unsafe location it was to work there. And they just didn't think about things. So it's good to check it. You need to have a reporting mechanism, whether that's just going to HR, but in your policy, you need to say how someone would report something they may have overheard or anything they think might lead to violence. So whatever that might be, that needs to be a part of your plan and in your policy. Now, this is a checklist about policies and statements. I would go to, and my term for it is Google University, which I love Google University. Google it. And so Google violence in the workplace policy if you don't have one. If you do, check yourself against this. They are some very simplistic ones to Virginia Tech, which is 37 pages long. So you can even find some probably that are in your industry or your type of work. And so don't start from scratch. Even look at what yours looks like now, and does it need to be updated? The one that I'm going to give you as an example, here's just some things that need to be in it. The famous words of HR, is up to it, including termination. Don't say you're going to terminate them, but you could. Sometimes you might refer them to counseling, but these need to be things that are in the content of your policy statement. Now, when you do your violence in the workplace policy, you need to make sure, and here's just a laundry list that I've come up with that needs to be checked, because there could be some overlap between what your no weapons policy says and your violence in the workplace policy. So they all need to be aligned. And so check and see if you make reference to something related to violence in any of these, then what do you say in your violence policy and in this one, so that they all align together. And so these are just some that I came up with that you need to check on and make sure that everything aligns appropriately and you don't get caught with misinformation. OSHA does have a policy. It's a simple one. So you may want a little more complex, but there is one there on their website. Now, do your training. And, when I do the training for managers or supervisors, I try to cover some what I call in-basket exercises. And I try to go over you'll see a laundry list of things that they need to know about and consider. And there is a sample training program at OSHA that you could look at. I'm going to give you 2 locations with actual workbooks that are excellent, that somebody's already developed, so don't reinvent the wheel, and I find them very helpful, and I've used them in training. I'll give that at the end of the presentation. Now, I want you to look at these 2. USA Today did a study about violence in the workplace, and they interviewed 225 individuals who were in prison for killing at work. So the person on the left, we're going to talk about him first. Larry, sorry, get my newspaper up. Larry Hansel. This is what disturbs me. The average workplace murderer is likely to be unmarried. Michael was unmarried. Male. Michael was a male. On the job 4 years. Michael had worked for us for 4 years. He has a grudge. Michael had a grudge, and he knows exactly whom he wants to kill. Michael wanted to kill HR and accounting. This gentleman, the same thing. He actually, Hansel in many ways is a typical employee who turns lethal. He says his attack was justified. And he was angry about an incident at work, and he attacked because he was laid off after being told not to talk about religion or philosophy at work. But he told people that he would do this if they let him go, and everyone ignored it. Now, James Davis, he said if he were ever fired, he talked about it. So 2 days after being let go, he comes back and kills 3 of his coworkers. And what they found in this study, USA Today, is in nearly 8 of 10 cases, killers left behind clear warning signs, sometimes showing guns to coworkers, threatening their bosses, or talking about attacking. But in the majority of cases, employers ignored, downplayed, or misjudged the threat. According to a USA Today analysis of the 224 instances of fatal workplace violence. So people didn't take it seriously. And because of that, employees died. So you really cannot ignore it. It's like that sign at the airport. You cannot ignore it. So there are warning signs, and you've got to listen to them. And the key is alerting and educating your managers on what those warning signs are so that they can think about it and decide. So here's some signs of trouble from employees. If you look, desperation over finances, that was Michael. So must be right all the time. Chronic hypersensitive complaints. So you've got to think about this and just make people aware of some of these warning signs. So if they do see them, they'll recognize them and at least bring it forward to human resources. There's also some performance red flags that they talk about now. And so these are just some of those that you need to be aware of and managers need to be aware of, because they're, again, warning signs. And when I do the training, I really try to cover this and talk about stories that further validate this particular situation or performance red flags. Have an EAP. I think now everybody has them. Don't be the counselor. Refer employees to an EAP. They're trained. I'm not, and I don't want to be a counselor. And then check interviews. And I know we do that too. But I found this study. Let me see if I can, and here's some sample interview questions. I'm always amazed at what people tell you in an interview about what they think about their boss or their supervisor. It's wonderful, and yet it's scary. Oh yeah, I hate him. If I had a chance, I'd probably, hit him or whatever. And they'll tell you this in an interview. And I think, wow, I am so glad you're willing to share that with me, because I'm not going to hire you. And it's certainly easier to find it out before they're your employee, so that you don't even bring them on board. But let me get to my last two slides. Look at this survey that SHRM did, where employees regularly or sometimes falsify job applications. Look at the third one down, criminal records. So I'm sure now most people all check it. We do, or did at UAMS. I'm now retired, but I know they still do. And so you've got to make sure that you check those, and even check with the former employee. We're terrible though. HR only verifies date of hire and job title. So I always want to talk to the supervisor, who will tell me usually more than HR. And then the second survey, look at what they won't give you if you check to reference. Violent or bizarre behavior. They're just hoping you hire them away from them. And personality traits. So they're not going to tell you about an employee who could be trouble for you. You have to do your due diligence to see if you can uncover it in some way possible. Now, I want to close with just, I think most HR people know the cardinal rules of termination. I used to do this little test and ask people what the best day was to terminate someone. And I had it wrong, or at least in one person's opinion. So in my attending classes, one of the instructors brought this up, and it made perfect sense to me. Friday is the worst day to terminate someone. Now, you may think it's the best day. It's the end of the week, they're going home, but actually it's the worst day, because they're going home and having to tell their family they just lost their job. And they can't go out and look for a job. They can't file for unemployment. All they can do is sit at home all weekend and get angry over what you did to them. And not only that, but their family could be very upset. And what does it mean financially to them? So to me, I always have changed my point of view totally on this. And I terminate on a Monday or Tuesday at the end of the day, and have found that's a better day to do it, because of what I learned from attending some of these classes on violence. And it made sense to me perfectly. Now, these are great resources for you. And I'm going to turn right now and get the two handbooks. And so be ready to write down these websites. And that will end my presentation today. The first one is called, let's see if I can show it to you. I don't know if that's going to come because it's backwards, but it's called Workplace Violence, Awareness and Prevention for Employers and Employees. And you can download it, which is what I did. And let me give you the website, and I will go slow because it's rather long. www.workplaceviolence, all together, .LNI dot WA dot gov. www.workplaceviolence.lni.wa.gov. And it's put out by the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries Division of the Occupational Safety and Health. The second one is called Building a Safe Workplace, preventing workplace violence, and it's called employee training. Now, I'm just noticing I don't have, I apologize, it doesn't look like I have the website, but let me tell you where you can find it. Go to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania website. So, and put in these words, the title, and it will come up for you. So it's, let me read you the title again. Building a Safe Workplace, preventing workplace violence, employee training. And it's a good one too. So either one of those, depending on your type of culture and your organization, you can see which fits your situation and what content you want to include. So I'm stopping. That's the end of my presentation. I want to thank everyone, and I hope I've shared some information you will find helpful in the future. So thank you, James, and thank you to the chapter. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was a powerful story about your experience and some great information that you presented and provided. So certainly appreciate that. I know we're running over time, so just real quickly, does anybody have a question that they'd really like to ask Kathleen before we go?
JW,
Yeah.
could she repeat where she said we go to find that last one? I
Sure.
think she said the Commonwealth of, but I couldn't remember what she said after that.
Yes, it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's from the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Let me add one thing to that. It's developed by it's a company that did it for them, and it's giving me the name of that. So you might want to add it, and I'll give it to you. It's the United Behavioral Health. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the United Behavioral Health.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, we certainly appreciate your time, Kathleen. We appreciate, oh, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, can you send this slideshow to us? I've got 2 pages worth of great information. There were a couple of things that I missed. Just wondered if we could get a copy of that.
Sure. James, I'll send it to you.
Okay, sounds
That's
good.
okay. And then you can just share it maybe on your website or however you share with members.
Sure. And I will also, I've started the last few meetings, I've started recording them. So this will also be able to be played back on demand, but you'll have to go to our website and go to the membership section and you can find it there. But yeah, if you'll send me the slideshow, I'll also share that, Kathleen.
Sure. Be happy to.
JW, I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Okay.
It might help. If anybody has Colonial Life supplemental insurance for their employees, if you don't have a separate EAP program, but you do have Colonial Life, they offer a free EAP if you have group life insurance, that's especially if it's employer paid. So if you do offer Colonial Life supplemental policies at your work and you don't know if you have the EAP, you may be able to reach out to your agent and find out because it's free.
I'll
Right.
add to that. I think Mutual of Omaha does. And so if you offer long-term disability or short-term, you ought to ask, like she said, a lot of them do give it free.
Guardian also offers it.
Good, good. That's great information. Really, again, really appreciate everybody taking the time to attend today. I know everybody's busy, so we'll let you get back to your regularly scheduled day, but keep in mind that we will have another meeting in December. That email will be going out in the next few days to let you register for that event. And Kathleen, thank you once again, and enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.